Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Data Science Hangout. I'm Rachel Dempsey. I lead customer marketing here at Posit. And I just want to add this in here because I learned that a few people are actually hearing about Posit for the first time through the Hangout. I'm going to mute people that unmuted. There we go. Curtis and KJ, I'll rely on you to mute people there. But I did just learn some people were hearing about Posit through the Hangout. So I want to add, if Posit is new to you as well, we're the open source data science company building tools for the individual, team, and enterprise. So I'm so happy to have you joining us here today. The Hangout is our open space to hear what's going on in the world of data across different industries, chat about data science leadership, and connect with others who are facing similar things as you. We get together here every Thursday at the same time, same place. So if you're watching this as a recording in the future on YouTube and want to join us live, there'll be details to add it to your calendar below. And just make sure it adds it for 12 Eastern time so that you can join us live. But if this is your first Hangout today, a special welcome to you. Feel free to let us know in the chat as well so we can all say hi. We're all dedicated to keeping this a friendly and welcoming space for everyone, and love to hear from you all, no matter your years of experience, titles, languages that you work in, industries. It's also totally okay if you just want to listen in here, and you can just comment in the Zoom chat and get to know people who are there as well. But there's also 3 ways you could jump in and ask questions or provide your own perspective. So you can raise your hand on Zoom and I will call on you to jump in. You can put questions in the Zoom chat, and feel free to put a little star next to it if it's something you want me to read out loud instead. And then Curtis or KJ will share the Slido link in a second here where you can ask questions anonymously. But with all that, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm so excited to be joined by my co-host for the day, Laura Ellis, VP of Data at Rapid7. And Laura, to kick us off here, would you be able to introduce yourself and share a little bit about your role, but also something you like to do outside of work too?
Ooh, okay. Thank you, Rachel, for having me on and reaching out. This is really exciting, and like what a good crowd that you have. That's hard to get. So this is really fun. So I'm VP of Data and AI at Rapid7, and what that means is I lead everything from our internal to external data and AI strategy. So that's things like our internal enterprise data warehouse, analytical tooling. I have some level of analysts that focus on internal analytics on my team. And in fact, actually, sorry, Cliff, I'm going to call you out. I just saw my colleague Cliff Stevens joined, which is so great. And so he's the VP of marketing at Rapid7. And he has a team too, because we have decentralized analytical layer. And then I also have data from a product perspective. So our all of the products that we make, they obviously have data as well. And so our central data strategy there, and then leveraging that to do AI to impact our customer. So that's the whole realm, but I'd be happy to dig into it because it's kind of high level. Okay, and the fun thing. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Rachel.
Oh, I was just going to remind you the fun thing too.
Fun thing, I know, right? Okay, so I'm a mom. I have a husband. I have 2 girls, 11 and 8, and I have 2 dogs. And we like to go hiking and stuff. And usually I'm not that fun, but I actually am doing something kind of fun. So my 11-year-old daughter is playing the guitar, and she's pretty good at it, actually. She's awesome. And she wanted me to learn as well with her. So since August, I've been learning how to play the guitar. And she's so good. I actually really understand how good she is because she's so much better than me, and it's very difficult.
I love that. That's amazing. So
And
you're writing
yes,
a song together?
um, not really, because when I play, she's frustrated at how much worse I am than her. But we like to listen to each other play, and sometimes we play easy songs together.
That's great. Laura, I also wanted to maybe kick this off with having you share a little bit about data mishaps night as well, because I learned recently that some people found about the Hangout through a data mishaps night and conversation that was happening there. So I want to make sure we share a bit about it as well. Could you share a bit about what that event is and how the group came to be?
Totally, yeah. So Data Mishaps Night, we just finished our 4th year. It's an event, virtual event that we run one time a year. My friend Caitlin Huden and I, who actually met through Our Ladies, posit previously our studio. And so we met through Our Ladies about 8 years ago and then just became super good friends. And it was during COVID that we would go on hikes together and we were just like, I miss the meetups. And so we decided to do this virtual event, but what we wanted to do is a little bit of a different take and talk about our mistakes because, on LinkedIn, and I mean, me too, everyone's like, oh, all these great things we can do and everything we should do and all the successes. But you don't hear about the failures as much. And in data, because in data fails silently, right? So it can look real, but it's deceiving you. So it's really, really, really important that we're open to being wrong and we're open to asking questions and just sort of like being humble. And so we wanted to have this event where everybody could share the data mistakes that they've made, get a little laugh out of it, learn a few things. And we just finished our 4th year and I think we got close to 400 people, which is amazing if you think about that there's 400 people out there that want to spend an evening talking about data for 2 hours is pretty cool.
That's great. How do you carry that over into your role at Rapid7 and like the data community within the company?
Well, I probably should more formally carry it over. Maybe Cliff and I can collaborate. I know Cliff just came to join, but I'm just pulling you in here. Maybe we should collaborate on something a little bit more formal. But personally, I think we have a pretty good culture of communicating and sharing and, just being open about our mistakes and creating that safe space. I think that's what we're going for on the data teams as well, just because, again, I think our successes and the things that we're good at are basically just a result of everything we've studied and all the failures we've made. So we really need to make sure that we're supporting that.
Do you want me to add to that, Laura? Like
Pardon?
you want me to add to that of what you're doing at Rapid7 that you may not even realize?
Oh man, I don't know.
I think a lot of it is also just like the data education, right? Like where we're at, what are the trends, what are the central sources of truth? Like that's why I joined today because I was super interested. I saw Laura's LinkedIn post promoting this, and I was like, okay, well, this is going to be a great moment for me to learn from a bunch of industry pros, just because I don't have that kind of innate data perspective. And that's something that Laura drives from a culture perspective at Rapid7. And to the point of like, wow, I'm here today is to kind of listen in on that. And I think that's such a grounding moment because of just the complexity of data strategy, data architecture, tech that's in there, data flows, user experiences, then also how it impacts teams like our marketing department, where we're looking at a connected based journey, right? Basic things on that side of CDPs and what those look like. And so that's an area where I think for us to get grounded in it, Laura's done a really good job of establishing the value and the quality and the current state of where we are, and then also the opportunities within that. So she's humble in that nature too. But it's also just been like, how do you have a voice of like, how do you create that data strategy across the organization? And so she's done a really nice job with that. And that's why I was like, okay, well, how's she leveraging the community and the people out there, and what are they getting for insights, and what are the challenges here? So I can at least then champion that perspective back, on the marketing end on my end. So
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Totally.
That's very
Yeah, and
nice.
thanks for joining us as well, Cliff. Laura, I know you gave us a little bit of an overview of all the different teams that kind of roll up to you as well and teams you work with. Would it be possible to kind of share an example maybe of how you're using data across the organization, just to put us all in your mindset and think of the types of business problems you're working on?
Yeah, it's a good question because honestly, it's really varied. It's really, really varied. So our internal analytical team focuses on everything, and my enterprise data warehouse team, right? Like they focus on everything from running the business. I mean, I heard a good talk the other few weeks ago that we shouldn't undersell the value of just like plumbing things, sending data where it needs to be so that people can get the information that they need. So everything from running the business to creating like more strategic assets around value realization, or even managing risk at the company, like risk of a variety of angles, even like product quality. So again, on the analytical side, it's really around running of the business use cases, which involves both the data plumbing as well as the using of the data to make decisions. And then on the product side, we have a really cool few projects going on right now. So, you know, everybody's in this big race for AI, right? We all on this call know this, and we too are running as fast as we can. Somebody said something like you're trying to outrun a tidal wave, basically. So, or tsunami even, I think. So we're doing that too. And we're run. And we have some really cool AI projects, some which are, so I'll give you an example. So I'm in cybersecurity. It's just that, you know, Rapid7 is a cybersecurity company. And some of the biggest challenges with cybersecurity is it's such a volume game, right? Like if you're using our tools, you have to protect the entire landscape of all of your assets, all of your software, all of the granular pieces of software across on-prem to cloud and active threats. And so people that are doing cybersecurity have a tough job. They're basically just looking at mountains of alerts and trying to decide like, where should I spend my time? Which vulnerabilities should I remediate? And so on the AI side, we leverage both the traditional ML to do things like kind of auto processing of alerts so that we can help people get to the things they need to look at faster. But we're also using LLMs to do like, we have our own chatbot internally too. I think a lot of companies do, but we have our own proprietary one that our analysts use. We do auto generation of incident reports, the first draft with LLMs. We're using LLMs even to actually develop some of our vulnerability content in ways that would have been done completely different. So those are some of the those are some of the projects. And then I guess the last thing I'll say is, and if you want to do all that, you better have good data. And so we also have a whole effort going on this year to really like unify all of the different product data so that we can get access to it easier.
Thank you for that overview. I know in the like bio that you sent over as well, you added you have a passion for making AI and analytics accessible to everyone in a secure and scalable manner. And so I was just wondering, could you share a little bit more about how you're working towards that goal as well?
So I think because it's the two things, it's the secure and the scalable and accessible, right? And so I think it's funny because in a lot of my journey, it would have been more analytically focused where, you know, we have to make sure that all data, this is not the fun stuff, but honestly, I kind of think it's fun. It's like, we have to categorize all of the data. We have to have policies. We need to make sure that all users have a role. And then we need to make sure that people have access granted as per the policies. This seems maybe not as fun, but it just feels so good to have these things clean and running well. And it's really important. And then, but I also think enablement is super important. So our team does every data set that we roll out, we've gone through a huge transformation. Every data set that you roll out, like we have to have documentation. Every new edition that we do, we usually have a blog on it. We have a monthly newsletter where it's like, if you're a data or AI nerd, you can see everything that's going on in the past month. Every tool has to have a getting started and a weekly office hours as well. So that that's kind of what we do on the analytical side. And then the AI side, we're ramping up there, but it's pretty similar. Like we just got all of our policies finalized and our technical infrastructure to make sure we can see what models are out there. And then there's never enough AI people right now. Like there just aren't. There's not enough data scientists. All these wonderful people on this call, there aren't. So with these AWS services or Google services, how do we turn developers into data scientists, but keep them on the rails? So we do a lot of enablement as well.
Yeah, that's actually something that came up last week as well, is talking about hiring people for these roles and how a lot of the job descriptions are asking for years of experience with AI when a lot of this is so new. And so I'm wondering, how do you think about hiring as well for those roles?
Yeah, we have actually, right before this call, we were going over our road. I was meeting with our AI and data science team to go over our roadmap because, you know, we have sheets of projects that we want to do and not enough people. And so we're going through and saying, like, what do we have to do ourselves? And what can we teach people how to do? So we do like a research sprint with them, and then we help bootstrap the making of it, and then we teach them to run with it. So it's not an exact answer to what you said, but how do we think about the hiring is that with all of these cloud services where no, we're not leveraging ChatGPT out of the box, but we do leverage like AWS Bedrock and like some of the Claude models, etc. You know, our developers already work in AWS. They can call those APIs and we can help them with the prompt engineering around that, for example. And so when we think about who to hire, I would say, yes, we do need more AI data science people who know what they're doing and can really focus on that research aspect. But we also just need to skill up a lot of the developers as well to be able to use the services and know the guardrails and know where and how to get help.
Thank you. I see Rogerio had a question in the chat. I see the little star next to it, so I'll read it. But it's, can you talk a little about the data pipeline from the company databases to the traditional ML models? And there was a follow-on question, is data warehouse still used?
So it's different for analytics versus production because I don't know, this is my biased view. Like, so Snowflake's obviously very, very popular for analytical workloads. I think it gets very expensive if you're talking about production, like product data workloads. So they tend to be a little bit different, right? Like your analytical warehouse and pipelines versus the product. The analytical pipelines also, some of that can be batched. Like it doesn't all have to be real time. You know, we can pay for tools that are a bit more focused on the end user versus like the analytical user versus developer experience. And we don't have to pay for real time necessarily for everything on the analytics side. Whereas on the product side, we probably need real time. We're probably looking more like Kafka and like Flink processing and more distributed query layer type of access, like Starburst or Trino, etc. And yeah, so I'd say that those are that's kind of what we're looking. We have more analytical patterns on the internal side, and then we have more of that like real-time production level for product. I don't know if that answered the question.
Rogerio, feel free to type into the chat if you have any follow-up question on that too. All right, I'll say people are a little quiet today, so I want to remind people how you can ask questions. So if you join after I said this in the beginning, just a reminder, you can use the Zoom chat for questions, but also feel free to just raise your hand here in Zoom if you need to know how to do that. In the bar below, there's the reactions button, and then you can click that and raise your hand. But then we do have the Slido link where you can ask questions anonymously too. But I do see there's this kind of conversation that happens in the chat quite a bit about well, we've called it data stewardship before, we call it data governance before, but I see Shannon mention defining access and permissions can feel uphill, but once that's in place, everything works so much smoother. And so I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into that topic as well, and just understand like what you're doing to help make that easier across the organization, and defining the access to certain data sets for everybody.
Yeah. So this is the interesting thing. So in a past role, so I've been in data for almost 20 years. I've done all different data roles, from software engineering to databases to data analysis to data science, architecture, and then onto the leadership. And I kind of like dabbled in the security, but I never felt it so badly until we, in one of my previous roles, went to get FedRAMP certification. So it's like federal compliance with your security protocols. And I can tell you that gets so serious so quickly. And it was really hard, but it's almost like cathartic that once you kind of get it all organized, it feels so good. So anyways, I say that because in a weird way, I actually really like this stuff. I really like the labeling and categorization of data and providing access. But the one thing I would say is it's always better to keep it simple. It is always better to keep it simple. Less categories, less users, like less categories, data categories. Keep them broad as you can. You'll have special exceptions. Less roles of users. Again, you'll have some special exceptions, but try to keep the main categories for data pretty broad and the users for pretty broad, so that the rules are pretty simple. Because even though I think if you set out to it and you're asking everybody and you're trying to like make this beautiful thing, it's actually not practical, and it's actually less secure because you have way too much to conform to. People don't understand the rules. They don't understand why they can't access the data. They start develop these weird workarounds. It's better to keep it really simple, really transparent. That's the advice I would give. But at the end of the day, I guess the other thing is like, that's the advice I would give. And then this is just one of those things that you just have to do it. But you can sleep really well when you do.
The list of things you just have to do first. Well, thank you for that, Laura. I'd love to also talk a little bit more about your journey into data as well, and a little bit about your career journey. So I'm wondering, like, was there maybe a turning point for you, or when did you first like decide to go into the field of data?
Yeah. So I did software engineering in school, because this is why I love data though, actually. I bet everybody on this call has such a different path to data. It's so cool. I feel like there's not as many specialties where it's just such a wide range of people converging on data, because it's like a language and everybody needs it, and then you kind of get that hooked, and then you can invest more and more. So I came a bit more on the traditional path, software engineering. I joined IBM out of 1 year out of school, and I just happened to join the DB2 team, which is a database most people probably don't know on this call, but it was very popular back in the day. And that was my job. And I was like, I kind of like this. And then from there, this is a crazy aging thing. Actually, online dashboards became a new thing. There was a time in the world when online dashboards were bleeding edge. And I thought, that is awesome. So I followed that. And then this is also kind of neat. Like, I had my first child in 2012, and in Canada, no, 2013, so my daughter was born on New Year's Day, so January 1st, 2013. And in Canada, you get 1 year off. So this was actually pretty cool because data this whole time, and including until now, has been on this upwards rise, like almost exponential, right? And so even back in 2012, the same thing was happening. And I was just sort of like following it and seeing, and I was excited by it. But at the same time, I was getting excited. The industry was too, and it was getting more accessible. But I went on maternity leave for 1 year. Before I went on maternity leave, I was doing analysis, but more like make me this report, make me this report. And nobody really cared about what I was doing because they just wanted their reports. I came back from maternity leave 1 year later, and everyone was like, tell me about data. Tell me about data, because there was this article that was posted, kind of a cheesy title, but it was like sexiest job of the 21st century. That was, and everybody just got so excited by it, and they were stopping me to ask about my job. And I'm used to being the person sitting in a cubicle, just like pulling numbers. And so then I ended up getting into data science, and I went and got my master's because some of the questions that they were asking weren't just analysis. They weren't just like what happened. They were like, what will happen? Predictive analytics. How are these populations different? Right. So, you're doing like t-tests or whatever, ANOVA testing. And I was like, I don't know how to tell you these answers because we don't have data for that. I can't tell you what will happen in the future. What do you want from me? And that's when I started exploring statistics, getting into data science. Then I kind of went on a tear about realizing how horrible data actually is, and we should focus on the pipeline. That's how I got into the architecture, data engineering side. And then you kind of have that thing where you're like, it's actually the people. And that's how I got into leadership. So that was my long-winded journey, but I just kind of kept following that next thing that seemed interesting.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Laura. I see there's a question from N. Bradley in the chat, and there's an asterisk there. So maybe lots of us are working at coffee shops today, so I'll read it. But it's working in a field that puts so much pressure on hard skills. What soft skills did you feel benefited you most in your career to progress and through various leadership roles?
Oh my gosh, right? It's so true. Because the thing is, and I feel like we've all heard this saying, like, what got you there? What got you here won't get you there. So you can build all your hard skills and then you get the promotion. And we do see it, like I do see it. Developers will get promoted to like lead or manager. And all of a sudden they don't have any of those soft skills to actually get the job done, work with their peers, communicate what they're doing. And so hard skills, technical skills, super duper important, but also we have to be focusing on the soft skills too. And I think communication is like the number one thing. Communicating what you think they're asking you to do, what you're going to do, what you said you'd do, what you did, what you didn't do. You can't communicate too much. And then the second, maybe just off the top of my head, is probably partnership. I think a lot of, on the technical side, we're really incentivized to produce. But once you get into leadership, your version of producing is really like through influence through others, like with influence with others, whether it's your team or cross or up. And so you really have to have that real partnership focus to be able to drive the results.
Absolutely. I love all the comments in the chat as well. Libby, I appreciate your comment about soft skills there too. Curtis, I know you had a question a little bit earlier. I think it was on maybe data security issues. Do you want to ask that question?
Yeah, I mean, sure. Since you have quite a bit of experience with data security and there's a lot of practitioners and leaders in here, I was kind of curious if you had maybe examples or advice on the kind of the big vectors of concern as like an individual contributor or like org should be worried about. And then, it's always best to hear real world examples if you have some like good gossip you want to share or,
Oh man, that's a good one. Now, So I think like, again, it depends on the systems, and maybe I'm thinking too tactically because I'm like, what do you exactly want to do? But at the end of the day, when you're thinking about data security, you have to, and I feel like it's so simple, so I hope it's even helpful, but like, you have to be able to see everything, first of all, right? So you have to get it all down, get it all visible. What are all of the systems, and I always say this, which store or process your data, because they're all in scope. So identify all of the systems which store or process your data. And then you have to identify what is the data. And that kind of goes to the categories thing, but like you have to really get the lay of the land. And then you have to identify what are we allowed to do with it, but not just as per our opinion, as per our legal policies, and then our company values and ethics, right? And those are like the most important pieces. See everything, understand what it is and who and how can we use it. And then it's really like a matching game therein. And then, you make the policies, you implement the policies, and you monitor and audit the policies. It sounds so boring, but like it's that simple. And what I would say is like, it sounds like boring. It is that simple, and it can seem really daunting, right? It can seem really daunting. Everyone's coming up to you with their own special thing, but you just have to stay focused on doing those core buckets, setting up your foundation, and then you can build from there. And the reason I'll say this, the reason I'm trying to be like, it's not that hard. I think people in the industry have worked out their basic data governance. You just got to work through it. But I think I just released a blog on this. We are running towards a disaster on the AI governance front. It's the same thing. You got to see what you're working with. You got to know the data it feeds in. You got to know how you're allowed to use it. You got to have a policy. You got to implement. You got to audit. And like, people are making AI governance into this scary, unachievable thing. And if we thought data governance was a problem in the past, like AI governance is going to be our nightmare in 5 years if we don't get a handle on it. Sorry, I took out my soapbox. I stepped on it. I started.
No, I was just gonna say I love the way that you make everything sound so practical. Like, don't make it so scary. This is how you should do it. But then I was like, oh, it got a little scary towards the end.
Yeah. So yes, you're right. It is not scary. None of it's scary. And I'm like, just do the same thing for AI. It's also not scary. What's scary is if you don't do that. So just
Right,
do it.
yeah.
Make your basic foundation layer. Because people will say, I'll talk to them like, I only have 2 models. Why do I need to do that? I'm like, yes, because you only have 2 models now. Guess what? Your company is going out making all these models. Why wait?
Yeah. Mike, I see your hand raised. Want to jump in next?
Thanks, Rachel. The discussion of soft skills versus hard skills lit something in me, and I'm sure we've discussed it before in Data Science Hangout. But why do we even make a distinction? Because it kind of suggests that hard skills are acceptable. Doesn't matter if you're a sociopath, and that doesn't as a manager of people, I'm like, no, I don't. I'm not going to employ someone who's just walks over everyone and behaves in really awful ways. So shouldn't we kind of just say, look, it doesn't matter if you think it's a hard skill or a soft skill, because if you don't have a good blend of both, and if you don't have basic skills of talking to people and managing with people and working with people, then it doesn't matter how good you are at stuff.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And I think so. Sometimes, again, when talking to those developers who are moving up because they're really good at the hard skills, so they can just get things done, just boom, 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 boom. Look, I executed. Then they get a promotion, and then all of a sudden they're not able to execute. It's like, how do you think you're a smart person, saying this to them, you're a smart person, you want to do big things. You've got all these hard skills. You don't have enough hours in the day. So how do you solve that? You get other people to work with you. How do you get other people to work with you? Other skills than these technical skills. But I
mean,
agree.
I guess there's a time and place. If you're in a startup where the pressure's on and everyone's, in a high anxiety and, high just wanting to get things out the door, that is about the only circumstance in which case you might get away with not having the working with other people skills honed. But everywhere else, it's like, no, you need these.
Right.
Non-negotiable.
And there's a ceiling to you if you don't, really.
Exactly. Exactly. I think I've worked with one person in long past who seemed to have absolutely zero soft skills, but he was a prickly and awkward customer. But he did know everything about how to get data in and out of databases. So in that sense, it was something going for him.
He was useful in some ways.
David, I see you had a question in the chat as well. Want to jump in next?
Yes, ma'am. How everybody doing? Hey, Laura.
Good.
Hi.
Thank you for
Oh
calling.
my gosh, David. Hi, David. Great to
How are
see
you?
you.
Good to see you
Hi.
too. Been a while.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about what productivity is for somebody that has to do versus somebody that has to lead. So I'm
Mhm.
just curious as to, over the years, what has been your most difficult things to change or to do, going from somebody that actually does the technical work to becoming somebody that leads the technical work? And how did you change your habits to be able to accomplish that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And there's probably so many of them. And every time you think like, I've got this handled, you're gifted with new opportunities, which also expose new areas of growth for you as well. Like for me personally, I'm saying, I think, so for me, I am, for better or worse, I like to think strategy, but I am a list slayer. Like I just like to have a list and I just like to work through it as well. And so I can be really focused on getting things done. And so I think having to become more patient with enabling people to do it themselves and maybe not do it, up to a certain standard, or, yeah, basically that is going slower to bring other people along. I think that was something that going from more of a tech focused role to more of a leadership role was something that took me a while to orient to. And I think a lot of technical people might face that as well, because you're used to going at a certain speed and now you have to bring everybody with you. And this is a beautiful thing, but you have to start by going slower than you normally would. And eventually you all go faster together.
No, great answer. I appreciate that. I see that the hardest thing has been to realize there's different ways things can be done.
Yes.
And it may not be the way I would have done it, but it gets the job done, and I need to not worry about that anymore. To let them do the job the way it needs to be done, or they can do it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
That's a good point, David, because it's like you might think they're missing something, but then they have other things that they are doing that you didn't even think of too.
Right. I agree, definitely. So you got to be open to all of that.
Yeah.
I noticed there was an anonymous question I missed a little bit earlier, but when we were talking about AI, it was, should we consider AI to be something that current analysts can pick up as part of their job, or should we think of it as a new profession?
I think, so it's a hard one. I think that it's emerging as a different set of, it depends how you call yourself, how you define an analyst, because honestly, that is hard too. We have like data analysts, business analysts, we have analytic engineers, we have data engineers. So I think we have this like spectrum anyways, with a whole lot of overlap. So I do think AI warrants its own title. Now, it may have a 90% overlap with what a data scientist is, and a data scientist may have an 80% overlap with an analyst. So I wouldn't get caught up on the roles. I wouldn't get caught up on like, I'm the same as them, but they have a different title, which I know the person is not saying. But I think it's enough of a new area that it does warrant at least making room for a title like that, because we're dealing with concepts that we didn't really have in broad population before, like LLMs, and they have different considerations around them, around data leakage. They have sort of different out of the box, like really viable out of the box cloud services that we didn't have before. Like there were always providers that said, oh, I can do out of the box ML, and it's kind of hit or miss. But these really, like you can really get really good out of the box LLMs. LLMs really do leak data. LLMs really do say crazy things, and they really do not always have transparency. And even when they have transparency, sometimes it's not real. So I think it warrants having a title. Whether an analyst, you know, also can do that, I think go for it. I think anybody can do that. I think AI and a lot of what I just described is super accessible, and that's why everyone's talking about it so much, because it's become so accessible to the general population. So I'd say, regardless of your title, go for it if you're interested. And probably every single profession out there will be using some level of AI in the next 5 years or 2 years even. I don't know if I answered that question well. I kind of like went all the way around and back.
I think you did. We won't know who anonymously asked it, but I'll say I think you did. I saw we're jumping back and forth here, but I see Brian had a question, and you put a star next to it, so I'll read it. But it was, are there any special strategies or difficulties with using data to identify threat actors or attack patterns?
Yeah. Yeah. So using data, or what was the other thing to identify threat actors and attack patterns?
Special strategies, any special strategies or difficulties with using data to identify threat actors?
Yes. So there's definitely lots you can do out there, because, you know, all of our computers are generating oodles of data, which encode, you know, kind of what's going on. And you know, we do already at the company leverage a lot of machine learning to be able to identify patterns, whether it's patterns of type of attacks. So if we're looking for a particular type of attack, you know, we can look through all the logs and then start to say, like, when this happens, it's typically this type of attack. And we do have those. You can also, so that's more like on the detection side. I think ML does a really good job being able to detect threats, active threats. On the what do I do about this, which is like alert triage. So you get a detection, it pops off alert. Boom, 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 look at this thing, right? Well, of course, we want as many of those as possible, but you're going to get so many. So how do you prioritize or get rid of the volume? Also, ML is specifically pretty good at that as well. Being able to do things like clustering. So these type of alerts are typically, they all are part of the same attack. So rather than an analyst just looking through them and having to make the association themselves, we can look at prior patterns and put clusters together. So they should look at them all. And then, you know, relative to a customer's environment or their baseline patterns, we could say, oh, actually, this is more malicious than we would think, because this customer never does this type of thing, right? So we can boost up the signal or reduce the signal. And then on the response side as well, that's where you can start really, that's where, like, so we already did those two things, but that's where you can really start leveraging the LLM side of the house, because you can start baking in context into the investigation that they're doing from other data and summarize it with LLM, so analysts can get data easier. Yeah, so I guess the answer is, like, yes, there's so much you can do, because cybersecurity is all about digital trails, which is just data at the end of the day. The hard thing, limitations, the hard thing is that attackers are changing their patterns all the time. So where you think machine learning AI is basically trying to predict based on past, but they're building new patterns every day. So that is difficult. We can do anomaly baselines and things. And then the second thing that is hard too is that they're using AI as well. So as we're beefing up with AI, they're using it too, because they're also essentially a resource constrained entity too, that is leveraging AI to also go better, faster, stronger, which I'd be happy to talk to, but it's kind of, a lot of companies out there are using AI to just be more efficient, and that's great, and they're just getting those gains. So are we. But we are also facing active headwinds from that as well.
Thank you, Laura. I see Doug just asked a question in the chat, and I'd love to have you jump in, Doug.
Yeah, sure. It's a very general careers question, but Rachel, you were touching on this business of people trying to work out how to get a first data science job or first ML job in particular. Yeah. Seems it's very hard unless you have 3 to 5 years of solid data science experience. That's my experience, and people are getting filtered out, not getting interviews. Seems that some people agree. Some people are also finding this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see a few people commenting on your thread there and agreeing. And I did want to just make sure I mentioned, if anybody is hiring, feel free to share your jobs in the chat here as well with everybody too. I forgot to say that at the beginning, but thank you for the reminder.
Mm-hmm. So,
and I think, Doug, the question was, do you have any tips for anybody starting to move into data science?
Yeah, I would say, well, there's a kind of cool thing that's happening now too, though, is so there's the postings for data science and AI and ML. But I would suggest just getting like a data type of job and then starting to deliver AI and ML. If you want to do the data science, AI, ML, whatever we call it, if you want to do a job like that and you're finding it too hard to get it, my thing is get your foot in the door, get a job doing some level of a data job, and then just start delivering as well. I mean, you're going to have to put in some of your own time because you got to do the job you have as well. But I would start finding opportunities and work to deliver that. And then you can kind of like transition your career as you go. That's what I would do. I don't know if anybody else has suggestions too.
Yeah, Grishma or Cody or Bill, I see you put comments in there. Do you want to add anything? Oh, Peter, I see your hands raised. Want to jump in?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would really recommend strongly for folks is, and I look for this myself when I'm hiring, is I'm looking for folks who are producing some level of work. So being able to share your work, whether you're just starting to produce, work in a GitHub account, that could be something as simple as taking a data set, exploring it, building visualizations, and going through a traditional EDA workflow, evaluating and deriving inferences from that. And just as you would in an ordinary job where you're giving takeaways or recommendations to a stakeholder, I'd also recommend if folks invest small amounts of time in just writing up small documents. One of the things that people use LinkedIn all the time for is to generate ideas. And they're looking for ideas from people who can engage with data and communicate. I couldn't agree more with what Laura said about communication. I think that as a data science leader, I think I've spent a fair amount of time, half and half, between folks who prefer working with machines and folks who prefer working with people. And so bridging that gap of being able to communicate really sets yourself apart from probably a dominant majority of folks. And that is a great opportunity to show your work. So I would say, publish if you can. Small amounts of time will pay you big dividends. And it's also a way of demonstrating that what you're trying to accomplish with your roles in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you, Peter. Grishma, I see you have your hand raised now. You want to add to this?
Yeah. Hi, Laura. Long
Hi,
time.
Krishna, yeah.
I think definitely putting yourself out there, right? Adding to what Peter said about publishing, whether that's an article on LinkedIn or just like, a quick TikTok reel about, hey, this is the school data set I found. These were the findings. And, here's a link to whatever, artifact you have. I think also looking at meetups, community meetups, they are always on the hunt for speakers. I know it can be scary to speak publicly, but just try to give it a shot, see what it feels like, because what that happens is that eventually people start thinking of you as an expert when you're out there on the stage talking about different things, and you gain that confidence, and it also increases your visibility to potential employers, to potential managers. So I think combining that with the networking aspect of it is another way to stand out a bit.
I love that. Great idea.
Yeah,
Shout out for the Boston meetup. If anybody wants to give a lightning talk at that, let me know.
Yes. I couldn't agree more with both of those. Those are so good too, right? The learning out loud.
Absolutely. Well, I know as we start to get towards the end of time, I want to make sure I always ask this question. But as you look back and think about career advice that you've either received over your career or given to others on your team, is there a piece of career advice you'd like to share with us?
So I think there's two. So the one I always say is like, just get started. Whatever it is, if we're talking about the governance, it's like I need to stop talking about governance so much because people are going to think that I'm so obsessed with, governance and data policy. But whether it's that or whether it's learning a new AI ML technique or, learning DBT, I'm just making it up, right? Like just get started. You just keep going. And then it's so funny when you just keep going and you just take all those gremlins off your shoulder that are telling you, you can't, you're not good enough. Who do you think you are? Right? Like just get them off, get going. And, to Grishma's point, what you'll do is you'll find out like 5 months, 1 year later, 2 years later, all of a sudden you've built some skills. You're pretty good at this. Maybe you're even seen as an expert, right? So the just get started is my number one. And then the other thing is, it's like, I don't know about the people in this room, but sometimes you can find yourself in a position where you've been given a big project or something and you think, and especially like people in this, data and AI, data science, whatever that we call it, is changing so quickly. I think probably a lot of people in this room are getting these new challenging projects or growing themselves in one way or another. And you're thinking like, can I do this? Should this really be me? Like, is there somebody more qualified than me to be doing this or speaking about this or whatever? And I would just say like, everybody here is entirely unique, brings entirely their own set of skills to the table, their own perspective, life experiences, whether it's, all these hard skills or I don't know, all these tech skills or, more breadth of leadership or responsibility experience. There's nobody that has a superset of your skills out there. There's literally nobody who has lived your life and then has everything else you don't have. So trust yourself that you're pursuing this thing, you're in that new role, you're having that new project for a reason, and you will be good.
I love it. Thank you. I want to make sure I don't miss questions that have been asked a little bit earlier. So raise your hand if I missed something that you said. But Benjamin, you just added something a minute ago around how people are handling the flood of applications. Do you want to jump in and explain that a bit?
Oh yeah, no, I don't know if it's just bemoaning the current tightness of the job market, but it just seems like a kind of an unfortunate scenario where, as an applicant, you feel kind of like you have to go for volume, but then I'm sure on the hiring side, that's just overwhelming. You're just getting tons and tons of, the gamut of quality of applications, but probably a lot of just kind of spammy ones as well now, all AI generated. And just kind of feel, I'm not quite sure what the solution is, but or how hiring orgs are handling it, but it feels kind of unideal for both job seekers and people hiring. So yeah, just kind of throwing that out there. So,
It's like the opposite of a bottleneck. Don't know what it's called.
yeah.
Right. I mean, I would say too, like that kind of speaks to Peter and Grishma, especially's point, where it's like, yeah, you have all these floods in, but we also know people in communities like this, you know, that's where it's great to go out there and make those connections, even if you've never done a ML job, AI job, data science, go reach out to people on LinkedIn. Like, hey, I would love to do something like you in the future. I would love to work on your team in the future. Can I ask you a bit about what your daily life looks like? And then they know you. I think you know, Benjamin and Doug, probably you would agree, a lot of hiring is also done through people that you know as well.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's a good, maybe soft skills are the solution after all.
Yeah.
Yeah, making those connections and getting to know people, yeah, is the kind of counter to an overwhelming the marginal cost of just creating more volume of online stuff is there. So we just got to connect with real people. So yeah.
Yeah,
I
humans.
encourage you to connect with people that you meet here in the Hangout. I do know of a few people who have actually found new roles because they met somebody here in this space, which I absolutely love to hear. And so I shared the LinkedIn group a little bit easier, or a little bit ago. That sometimes makes it easier to connect. If Curtis or KJ, you wouldn't mind grabbing that link again and sharing it. But I also just wanted to put a call out to check out Laura's blog as well, which I shared in the chat. And Laura, I'm so like impressed by all that you do in the community and seeing Data Mishaps Night, reading your blog posts, and I'm wondering, like, how do you set aside time to keep up with that part of it as well? And if you have any advice for us on doing the same.
Thank you. That was very nice. I mean, honestly, I'm like stressed out a lot. I'm always running around trying to like do things, but I really like it. That's really honestly the thing, is like I wouldn't do it if I didn't like it. The Data Mishaps Night, Caitlin and I are I mean, it's like you could be on a work trip and you're sending out the link to the Zoom chat, or it feels a little bit, I mean, honestly, sometimes I'm like, why did I do that? Why am I doing this? Even I just released that AI governance blog, and I released it and I thought to myself, does anybody even care about AI governance? You know, but I do. I care about it. And so I wanted to get my thoughts out there. And the Data Mishaps Night, it fills our bucket. You know, it is hard. I wouldn't say I have any at all secret for success to doing it all, except for that I really like it and care. And I think people innately make room for the things that they really do like and that fill their bucket.
That's great. Well, thank you. I'm glad that that is in your filler bucket and we all get to benefit from that in the community here. But thank you so much, Laura, for taking the time to join us. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for the great questions. I love getting to go back and reread the chat after because I don't get to do it at the same time. But have a great rest of the day, everybody.
Thank you. Have a great day.